The sledgehammer crashed through the concrete one final time as Marcus wiped sweat from his brow, staring at the demolished remains of his backyard pool. 3 months of legal battles, sleepless nights, and mounting lawyer fees, all because his neighbor, Karen, insisted the pool was encroaching on her property. Now, as he stood victorious in his own yard, the sound of heels clicking on pavement made his blood run cold. Karen marched across his lawn, clutching something in her manicured hands like a weapon. "I have proof," she shrieked, waving a crumpled piece of paper above her head. "Google Maps doesn't lie." What she was about to reveal would turn everything Marcus thought he knew about his property and his sanity completely upside down. The sledgehammer felt heavier with each swing, but Marcus Chen refused to stop. Concrete chunks scattered across his backyard like broken teeth, and with every impact, he felt a surge of vindictive satisfaction that probably wasn't healthy but definitely felt deserved. "That's it, baby," his wife Elena called from the patio, raising her coffee mug in a mock toast. "Show that pool who's boss." Marcus paused, muscles burning, and surveyed the destruction. What had once been a pristine 20 by 40-foot swimming pool, the centerpiece of their backyard paradise, now looked like a war zone. The demolition crew had finished their work yesterday, but Marcus had insisted on taking the final swings himself. Symbolic closure, he'd told Elena. Therapeutic violence, she'd called it. 3 months, he muttered, hefting the sledgehammer again. 3 months of pure hell because of that psychotic woman. The psychotic woman in question was Karen Whitmore, their next-door neighbor and the human embodiment of a homeowners association fever dream. She'd moved in 2 years ago and immediately began documenting every perceived violation of suburban perfection within a 3-block radius. Dead flowers, photographed and reported. Garbage cans left out past pickup, filed with the city. Kids playing too loudly, noise complaints to the police. But the pool had been her white whale. "It's over the property line," she declared during that first confrontation in March, standing at their shared fence with a measuring tape and the self-righteous fury of someone who'd found their life's purpose. "I measured. That pool is encroaching on my property by at least 18 inches. Marcus had laughed. Actually laughed. The pool had been installed 5 years ago by the previous owners, complete with permits, inspections, and a professional survey. He'd shown Karen the paperwork, the official property boundaries, even offered to pay for a new survey if she was genuinely concerned. That's when Karen had declared war. First came the certified letters from her attorney, a bottom feeder who specialized in neighbor disputes and personal injury scams. Then the formal complaints filed with the city's code enforcement division. When those were dismissed due to lack of evidence, Karen escalated to filing a lawsuit claiming property damage, loss of property value, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. The legal fees alone had cost Marcus and Elena nearly $15,000. Their attorney, a sharp-tongued woman named Rebecca Santos, had been confident they'd win, and they had. The judge had thrown out Karen's case with barely concealed irritation, ordering her to pay Marcus's legal costs and warning her about filing frivolous lawsuits. But the damage was done. The stress had taken its toll on Elena, who'd started having panic attacks whenever she saw Karen's face peering over the fence. Their peaceful backyard sanctuary had become a source of anxiety and conflict. Even victory felt hollow when you were too exhausted to enjoy it. So Marcus had made the decision. That shocked everyone, including himself. Tear down the pool. "You're letting her win," their friend David had argued over beers last week. "She's a crazy person who lost in court. Why give her what she wants?" Because sometimes, Marcus had realized, winning meant walking away from a fight that was poisoning your life. The pool had been tainted by months of legal battles and Karen's toxic presence. Every time he looked at it, he saw her standing there with her measuring tape and accusatory glare. Better to start fresh than live in the shadow of her manufactured outrage. The sledgehammer connected with the last chunk of concrete coping, sending it flying into the pile of debris. Marcus straightened, rolling his shoulders and feeling something close to peace for the first time in months. "Honey, you've got company," Elena called, her voice suddenly tense. Marcus turned to see Karen Whitmore marching across his lawn with the purposeful stride of someone on a mission. She wore her usual uniform, pressed khaki slacks, a polo shirt. That probably cost more than most people's mortgage payments, and tennis shoes so white they looked like they'd never touched actual pavement. Her silver hair was pulled back in a severe bun that seemed designed to give her a permanent headache, and her face bore the expression of righteous indignation that had become as familiar as her morning ritual of checking everyone else's property. 4 violations. But something was different today. She was clutching a piece of paper in her hands like it was a smoking gun, and her eyes held a manic gleam that made Marcus's stomach drop. "Karen," he said evenly, setting down the sledgehammer. "What can I do for you?" She stopped about 10 feet away, breathing hard from her power walk across his yard. "Don't you what can I do for you me, Marcus Chen. I know what you've been up to." Elena appeared at Marcus's side, crossing her arms. "And what exactly has my husband been up to, besides removing a pool from his own property?" Karen's lips twisted into what might have been a smile if it hadn't looked so predatory. "That's just it, isn't it? His property." She held up the paper, which Marcus could now see was some kind of printout. "I've been doing my research, and I have proof that you've been lying about the property lines this entire time." Marcus felt Elena stiffen beside him. "Excuse me." "Google Maps," Karen announced triumphantly, waving the printout like a battle flag. "Satellite view from 2019, before you moved in. This image clearly shows that your pool extends well beyond your actual property line. The real property line runs right here." She stabbed at the paper with her finger. "Which means that pool was built on MY land." The absolute absurdity of the statement hit Marcus like a physical blow. After months of legal battles, professional surveys, and court proceedings, Karen was now presenting a Google Maps printout as evidence of property fraud. "Karen," he said slowly, "we went through this in court. The judge saw the official survey. The pool was entirely on our property." "The survey was wrong," she snapped. "Or fraudulent. Google doesn't lie, Marcus. Their satellites don't take bribes or make mistakes. And this image proves that you've been trespassing on my property for years." Elena stepped forward, her hands clenched into fists. "Are you seriously suggesting that Google Maps is more accurate than a professional surveyor? That the county records office, our attorney, and a sitting judge were all wrong, but your internet printout is right?" Karen's face flushed red, but her grip on the paper never wavered. "I'm suggesting that you people have been running a scam from day one. That pool was built on my property, which means you owe me rent for the past 5 years. And now that you've destroyed MY property, you owe me damages." The silence that followed was broken only by the sound of a lawn mower starting up somewhere down the street. Marcus stared at Karen, trying to process the sheer audacity of what she was suggesting. Even for her, this was next-level delusional. "Let me get this straight," he said finally. "You think we built a pool on your property, then somehow convinced a professional surveyor to lie about it, bribed the county records office to falsify documents, and fooled a judge into dismissing your lawsuit, all so we could steal 18 inches of your backyard." "I think you're a lot more devious than people give you credit for," Karen replied. "But Google sees everything, and I'm taking this evidence straight to my attorney." She turned to leave, then stopped and looked back over her shoulder. "Oh, and Marcus? That demolition crew you hired? They just destroyed evidence of a crime. I hope you saved the receipts, because you're going to need them for the federal case I'm building." With that, she marched back across the lawn, leaving Marcus and Elena standing in stunned silence among the rubble of their former pool. "Federal case." Elena whispered, "Is she talking about the FBI?" Marcus shook his head, partly in disbelief, and partly in grudging admiration. After months of thinking he'd finally escaped Karen's orbit of crazy, she'd managed to find a whole new level of delusional harassment. The woman was nothing if not persistent. "She can't be serious," Elena continued. "Can she? I mean, Google Maps? Really?" Before Marcus could answer, his phone buzzed with a text message. He glanced at the screen and felt his blood pressure spike. The message was from an unknown number, but the content made the sender obvious. "Hope you enjoyed your little victory lap. Check your mailbox tomorrow." Marcus looked up to see Karen standing in a front window, phone in hand, watching them with the satisfied smile of someone who just played their ace. "What is it?" Elena asked, reading the expression on his face. Marcus showed her the text, watching as her face went pale. They both knew Karen well enough by now to understand that this wasn't just empty bluster. She was planning something, and whatever it was, it would be bigger and more vindictive. Rebecca Santos had been practicing law for 15 years, And in that time, she'd encountered every species of difficult client the legal system could produce. The vindictive ex-spouses who turned custody hearings into scorched earth warfare. The personal injury plaintiffs who claimed whiplash from shopping cart collisions. The HOA board members who treated property line disputes like international treaties. But Karen Whitmore was in a category all her own. "Let me make sure I understand this correctly," Rebecca said, adjusting her reading glasses as she studied the Google Maps printout spread across Karen's dining room table. The image quality was poor, clearly printed on a home inkjet printer. That was running low on cyan, but she could make out the aerial view of the neighborhood from what appeared to be several years ago. "You believe this satellite image proves that the Chen family's pool was built on your property, despite the fact that we had this exact issue adjudicated in court 3 months ago?" Karen leaned forward in her chair, her eyes bright with the fervor of someone who'd stumbled upon what she believed to be the smoking gun of the century. "Not just built on my property, deliberately built to steal my land. Look at this image, Rebecca. Really look at it." Rebecca had been looking at it for the past 20 minutes, ever since Karen had called her office that afternoon demanding an emergency consultation. The image showed the Chen property from above, with the pool clearly visible as a dark rectangle in their backyard. What Karen was pointing to as evidence of encroachment appeared to be nothing more than shadows and compression artifacts from a satellite photography. "Karen, I have to ask, why are you showing me this now? The case is closed. Judge Morrison dismissed your lawsuit with prejudice, which means you can't refile the same claim." "Because I didn't have this evidence before," Karen exclaimed, tapping the printout with enough force to rattle the china cabinet behind her. "My son Tommy found this image last week when he was helping me research property values for my homeowner's insurance. This is from 2019, before the Chens moved in. Look at where the pool sits relative to the fence line." Rebecca looked. The fence appeared as a thin dark line between the properties, and the pool was positioned several feet away from it, exactly where it should be according to the survey they'd used in court. "I'm not seeing what you're seeing, Karen." Karen's face flushed, and Rebecca recognized the warning signs. In her experience, clients who were this emotionally invested in being right rarely let facts get in the way of their convictions. "The shadows," Karen said, pointing to dark areas around the pool. "See how they fall? That proves the pool is closer to the fence than they claimed. Google satellites don't lie, Rebecca. They can't be bribed or fooled like surveyors." Rebecca set down the printout and studied Karen's face. The woman was clearly convinced of her interpretation, despite the fact that shadows in satellite imagery were affected by dozens of variables: time of day, season, cloud cover, satellite angle. Using them to determine property boundaries would be like using a funhouse mirror to measure your height. "Karen, even if this image showed what you think it shows, which it doesn't, you can't use Google Maps as evidence in a property dispute. Satellite imagery isn't surveyed or legally certified. It's not admissible in court for boundary determinations." "Then explain this," Karen said, producing another printout from a folder beside her chair. This one appeared to be a screenshot from a real estate website, showing the Chen property listing from when they'd purchased it 5 years ago. Rebecca examined the new document. It was a standard MLS listing with photos of the house and backyard, including several shots of the pool area. Nothing seemed unusual or incriminating. "What am I looking for?" "The description," Karen said triumphantly. "It says the pool is positioned for maximum privacy." "Maximum privacy from what?" "From me. They knew the pool was built too close to my property line, so they marketed it as a privacy feature." Rebecca rubbed her temples, feeling the familiar headache that came with clients who'd constructed elaborate conspiracy theories around mundane real estate language. "Karen, positioned for maximum privacy is standard marketing copy. It usually means the pool isn't visible from the street. Or it means they knew they were trespassing and tried to hide it with landscaping." The conversation was interrupted by a knock at the front door. Through the window, Rebecca could see a man in a delivery uniform holding a certified letter. "Excuse me," Karen said, practically bouncing out of her chair. "I've been expecting this." She returned a moment later with an opened envelope, her face glowing with vindication. "It's from the county assessor's office. I filed a formal request for them to investigate potential property tax fraud related to the Chen property." Rebecca's heart sank. "You did what?" "If their pool was built on my land, then they've been claiming tax benefits for property they don't actually own. That's fraud, Rebecca. Federal tax fraud. Karen, you can't just. I also filed complaints with the building department, code enforcement, and the state attorney general's office, Karen continued, pulling more documents from her folder like a magician producing rabbits from a hat. If there's a conspiracy to hide illegal construction, I'm going to expose it. Rebecca stared at the growing pile of official-looking documents, feeling like Alice tumbling down the rabbit hole. In the 3 months since Judge Morrison had dismissed Karen's lawsuit, the woman had apparently been busy filing complaints with every government agency she could think of. The building department is sending an inspector next week, Karen announced. Code enforcement is opening an investigation into whether the Chens violated setback requirements, and the Attorney General's office is reviewing my evidence of potential surveyor fraud. Karen, stop. Rebecca's voice carried the authority of someone who'd spent years talking clients down from legal ledgers. You need to understand something. Filing false or frivolous complaints with government agencies can result in sanctions, fines, and even criminal charges for abuse of process. Karen's smile faltered for the first time since Rebecca had arrived. False complaints. I have evidence. You have a blurry satellite photo and a conspiracy theory, Rebecca said bluntly. That's not evidence, that's delusion. And if you keep pursuing this, you're going to find yourself in serious legal trouble. The room fell silent except for the ticking of an antique grandfather clock in the corner. Karen's face cycled through a range of emotions: confusion, anger, hurt, and finally settling on cold determination. I thought you were different, she said quietly. I thought you'd understand that sometimes you have to fight for what's right, even when everyone else is too corrupt or lazy to see the truth. Rebecca gathered her papers and stood up. She'd been through this dance before with obsessed clients, and it never ended well. Karen, I can't represent you in this matter. Not only do I believe your claims are without merit, but I also represented the opposing party in the original lawsuit. It would be a conflict of interest. Then I'll find someone who will represent me, Karen said, walking Rebecca to the door. Someone who isn't part of this conspiracy. As Rebecca stepped onto the front porch, she noticed Marcus and Elena Chen standing in their backyard, watching the house. The demolition of their pool had left the yard looking raw and scarred, like a surgical site that hadn't healed yet. Karen, she said, turning back for one final attempt at reason. Those people just spent $15,000 defending themselves against your lawsuit. They tore down their pool, something they loved, just to try to have peace. Don't you think they've suffered enough? Karen's expression hardened. They brought this on themselves when they decided to steal my land. And if they thought destroying the evidence would make this go away, they were wrong. She closed the door with a finality that echoed across the quiet suburban street. Rebecca walked to her car, pulling out her phone as she went. She had an ethical obligation to warn Marcus and Elena about what was coming, even though she could no longer represent them. The phone rang twice before Marcus answered. Marcus, it's Rebecca Santos. We need to talk. Let me guess, Marcus said, his voice heavy with resignation. Karen's found a new way to torture us. She's filed complaints with the county assessor, building department, code enforcement, and the state attorney general. She's claiming tax fraud, illegal construction, and surveyor fraud, all based on a Google Maps printout. The silence on the other end of the line stretched so long that Rebecca wondered if the call had dropped. Marcus, are you there? I'm here, he said finally. I thought it was over. We won in court. We tore down the dam pool. What more does she want? She wants to be right, Rebecca said. And she's not going to stop until someone in authority validates her conspiracy theory or she faces serious consequences for harassment. So what do we do? Rebecca looked back at Karen's house, where she could see the woman silhouetted in her front window, still clutching her printouts. You're going to need a new attorney, someone who specializes in harassment cases. And Marcus, document everything. Every complaint she files, every inspector she sends to your house, every interaction you have with her. Because this isn't about a property line anymore, it's about obsession. After ending the call, Rebecca sat in her car for a moment, watching the Detective Ray Castellanos had been retired from the lab for 3 years, but his instincts were still sharp enough to recognize a potential nightmare client when she called. The woman on the phone, Karen something, had spent 40 minutes detailing an elaborate conspiracy involving property fraud, corrupt surveyors, and what she called big tech cover-ups involving Google satellite imagery. Under normal circumstances, Ray would have politely declined and recommended she seek therapy instead of a private investigator. But his mortgage payment was due next week, his daughter needed money for college textbooks, and crazy paid just, as well as legitimate. So here he was, sitting in Karen Whitmore's pristine living room, trying to make sense of the mountain of documents she'd spread across her coffee table like evidence from a serial killer investigation. The key is understanding the timeline, Karen was saying, pointing to a hand-drawn chart that looked like something from a conspiracy theorist's fever dream. The Chens bought the house in 2020, right after the previous owners installed the pool. But look at this. She jabbed at a printout of property records. The pool permit was filed 6 months before the sale. Why would someone install an expensive pool right before selling? Ray studied the documents, his trained eye picking out the relevant facts from Karen's interpretation. Maybe they thought it would increase the property value. Or maybe they knew they were building on my land and wanted to lock in the illegal construction before selling to unsuspecting buyers. Karen replied, her eyes bright with the fervor of someone who'd spent too many sleepless nights connecting dots that didn't exist. Ray had seen this before. People so convinced of their own victimization that they built elaborate narratives to explain why the world seemed to be working against them. Usually, it was divorced spouses convinced their ex was hiding assets, or workers certain their boss was sabotaging their career. But neighbor disputes could be just as consuming. Mrs. Whitmore, I have to ask, what exactly do you want me to investigate? You mentioned on the phone that you'd already taken this to court and lost. Karen's face darkened. I didn't lose. The system failed. Judge Morrison refused to consider my evidence because my lawyer was incompetent. But you're different. You're trained to uncover the truth, not just accept whatever lies people tell you. She pulled out another folder, this one thick with photographs and documents. I've been doing my own investigation for the past 3 months. Look at this. The first photograph showed the Chen property from what appeared to be Karen's upstairs bathroom window. The image was slightly blurry, clearly taken with a telephoto lens, and showed Marcus working in his backyard. I've been documenting their behavior patterns, Karen explained. Marcus does yard work every Saturday morning between 8 and 10 a.m. Elena waters her garden every Tuesday and Thursday evening. They have visitors on average twice a week, usually on weekends. Ray flipped through more photos, dozens of them, all taken surreptitiously from Karen's property. Marcus mowing the lawn. Elena checking her mailbox. Their teenage daughter getting into a car. Even their dog using the bathroom in the backyard. Mrs. Whitmore, Ray said carefully, this is extensive surveillance of your neighbors. Have you considered that this might be crossing some legal boundaries? It's not surveillance, Karen snapped. It's evidence gathering. Look at photo 17. See how Marcus deliberately avoids the area where the pool used to be. That's consciousness of guilt. He knows he was trespassing. Ray examined photo 17, which showed Marcus walking across his yard while carrying a bag of mulch. The area where the pool had been was clearly visible as a patch of disturbed earth and concrete debris. Or maybe he's avoiding it because it's a construction zone, Ray suggested. Karen waved dismissively. That's what they want you to think. But look at the pattern. Photo 23 shows Elena redirecting their sprinkler system away from that area. Photo 31 shows them installing new landscaping that specifically excludes the former pool location. They're trying to erase the evidence. The photographs continued in chronological order, creating a disturbing record of Karen's obsession with her neighbor's daily activities. Ray had investigated actual stalking cases with less documentation. Mrs. Whitmore, I need you to understand something. What you're describing, taking photographs of your neighbors without their knowledge, documenting their daily routines, filing multiple complaints with government agencies, this could be considered harassment. In some states, it might even qualify as stalking. Karen's expression shifted from enthusiasm to cold anger. Are you saying I don't have the right to protect my property? That I should just let them get away with stealing my land? I'm saying that the evidence you've shown me doesn't support the conclusions you've drawn. The Google Maps image isn't reliable for property boundaries. The photographs show normal neighbor behavior. And the conspiracy theory about surveyors and judges, well, it's a theory. Karen stood up abruptly, her hands clenched into fists. I thought you were different. I thought a real detective would understand that sometimes the system is corrupt and only an outsider can uncover the truth. Ray had reached his limit. He'd seen too many people destroy their lives chasing imaginary grievances, and he wasn't going to be part of Karen's descent into obsession. Mrs. Whitmore, I can't take this case. Not because I don't believe you, but because what you're asking me to do would be unethical and potentially illegal. You need to let this go before it destroys your life. Get out, Karen said quietly, her voice trembling with rage. Get out of my house. Ray gathered his jacket and headed for the door, but Karen's voice stopped him. You know what I think. Detective Castellanos? I think they got to you. Just like they got to the surveyor, the judge, and my lawyer. But I'm not giving up. There are people out there who still believe in justice. As Ray walked to his car, he pulled out his phone and scrolled through his contacts until he found the number for Marcus Chen. Rebecca Santos had given it to him as a reference check, standard procedure when investigating neighbor disputes. The phone rang 3 times before Marcus answered. Mr. Chen, this is Ray Castellanos. I'm a private investigator, and I need to warn you about something. Meanwhile, inside her house, Karen was already on the phone with someone new. Hello, is this Truth Seekers Investigations? I saw your advertisement online. Yes, I need help. Exposing a neighborhood conspiracy. No, the police won't help. They are all corrupt. What's that? You specialize in cases the establishment won't touch? Perfect. She glanced out her window at the Chen property, where Elena was retrieving mail from their mailbox, completely unaware that she was being watched. How soon can you start? 20 minutes later, Marcus stood in his kitchen, staring at his phone. In disbelief. Elena was making dinner, but he could tell she was listening to every word of his conversation with Ray Castellanos. She's been photographing us. Elena's voice was barely above a whisper. For 3 months. According to the investigator, she has dozens of photos. Our daily routines, when we come and go, even pictures of Sophia getting in her car. Their 17-year-old daughter looked up from her homework at the kitchen table. Pictures of me? That's seriously creepy, Dad. Marcus felt a surge of protective anger unlike anything he'd experienced during the original lawsuit. Legal disputes were one thing, but photographing his family crossed a line that made his hands shake with rage. What did the investigator say we should do? Elena asked. He recommended we file a police report and consider getting a restraining order. He also suggested security cameras and documenting any contact she tries to make. Elena sank into a chair, her face pale. I can't live like this, Marcus. I can't have my daughter growing up with some crazy woman taking pictures of her every time she leaves the house. Before Marcus could respond, their doorbell rang. All 3 of them froze, looking at each other with the paranoid alertness of people who'd learned to fear unexpected visitors. Marcus walked to the front door and peered through the peephole. A young man in his 20s stood on their porch, holding what appeared to be a clipboard and a camera with a massive telephoto. Lens, can I help you? Marcus called through the door without opening it. Mr. Chen, my name is Derek Walsh from Truth Seekers Investigations. I'm conducting an investigation into potential property fraud in this neighborhood. I'd like to ask you a few questions. Marcus felt his stomach drop. Karen had found someone willing to take her case. I'm not interested in answering any questions. Marcus replied, Please leave my property. Sir, I understand you might be nervous about speaking with an investigator, especially given the serious nature of the allegations. But cooperation would really be in your best interest here. Elena appeared beside Marcus, her face flushed with anger. Are you threatening us? Not at all. I'm just saying that people who have nothing to hide usually don't mind answering. A few simple questions. Like why you decided to destroy evidence right after losing in court. We didn't lose in court, Marcus snapped. Karen's lawsuit was dismissed. Right, but then why tear down the pool? Seems like an expensive way to celebrate a victory, don't you think? Through the peephole, Marcus could see Derek raising his camera and pointing it at their front door. The man was Photo. The police report had been filed, but Officer Martinez made it clear that unless Derek Walsh actually stepped onto their property or made specific threats, there wasn't much they could do about him photographing from public areas. Surveillance. From a public sidewalk isn't illegal, Martinez had explained, his tone sympathetic but helpless. Even if it feels like harassment, we need evidence of actual criminal behavior. That was 2 days ago. Since then, Derek had maintained his position across the street like a persistent paparazzi, documenting their every movement with military precision. Marcus had taken to closing all the curtains and using the back door to get to his car, but the feeling of being watched never left. Elena hadn't slept in 48 hours. She'd developed a nervous habit of checking and rechecking the locks, and Marcus had caught her standing at their bedroom window at 2 a.m., peering through a crack in the curtains to see if Derek was still there. He always was. "This is insane," Elena whispered as they sat in their darkened living room, afraid to turn on lights that might give Derek better shots through the windows. "We are prisoners in our own home." Sophia had been staying at her friend's house since. The surveillance began, refusing to come home until the creepy guy with the camera was gone. Marcus couldn't blame her. What 17-year-old wanted to live under constant observation by strangers? "I called that lawyer Rebecca recommended," Marcus said, his voice hoarse from stress and lack of sleep. "David Kim. He specializes in harassment cases." "What did he say?" "He's filing for an emergency restraining order tomorrow morning. But he warned me that getting one approved might take weeks, and even then, it might not stop the surveillance, if they're technically on public property." Elena's laugh was bitter and exhausted. "So we're supposed to just accept that some crazy woman can hire people to watch our house 24 hours a day, and there's nothing we can do about it?" Before Marcus could answer, his phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. His blood ran cold as he read the message. "Nice conversation with your lawyer today. Hope he's better than the last one." "Truth Seekers Investigations, how could they know about?" Elena started, then stopped as the implications hit her. "They're listening to our phone calls." Marcus felt a chill that went deeper than fear. "Or they've been close enough to hear us talking. Maybe they have directional microphones." As if summoned by their conversation, Derek's voice suddenly boomed across the quiet street, amplified by what sounded like a megaphone. "Good evening, Chen family. Just wanted you to know that hiding in your house with the lights off isn't going to make this investigation go away. We are committed to uncovering the truth, no matter how long it takes." Elena flinched as if she'd been slapped. "He's taunting us. In front of the whole neighborhood." Marcus pulled out his phone and dialed 911, but even as he waited for the dispatcher to answer, he knew what they'd tell him. Derek was on public property, exercising his First Amendment rights. The police couldn't stop him from talking, even if his words were designed to intimidate. 911, what's your emergency? "This is Marcus Chen at 1247 Maple Street. There's a man across from my house with a megaphone, harassing my family. We have an ongoing harassment situation and, sir, is the individual making specific threats or trespassing on private property?" Marcus closed his eyes. "No, but if he's on public property and not making direct threats, this would be a civil matter. You might want to contact your attorney." The line went dead. Through the window, Marcus could see Derek lowering his megaphone, clearly satisfied with the reaction he'd provoked. "That's it," Elena said, standing up with sudden determination. "I'm going out there." "Elena, no." Marcus grabbed her arm. "That's exactly what they want. They're trying to provoke us into doing something that gives them more ammunition." "I don't care." Her voice cracked with exhaustion and rage. "I can't live like this anymore, Marcus. I can't have my daughter afraid to come home. I can't spend the rest of my life hiding from some delusional woman and her hired thugs." Elena pulled free from his grip and headed for the front door. Marcus followed, his heart pounding, knowing that whatever happened next would either end this nightmare or make it infinitely worse. She yanked open the front door and stepped onto the porch, her silhouette immediately illuminated by Derek's camera flash. "What do you want from us?" she screamed across the street. "We won in court. We tore down our pool. What more can we possibly give you?" Derek raised his megaphone again. This isn't personal. This is about justice. Your neighbor has evidence that you've been illegally occupying her property, and she has a right to investigate that claim." "Evidence?" Elena's voice rose to a pitch that made Marcus wince. "You mean a blurry Google Map screenshot? Are you people insane?" "I understand you're upset, but getting emotional isn't going to change the facts. If you'd like to cooperate with our investigation and provide your side of the story, we'd be happy to. Get off MY Street. The scream came not from Elena, but from somewhere behind Derek. Marcus squinted in the darkness and saw a figure approaching from the other direction, an elderly man in a bathrobe, walking with the purposeful stride of someone who'd reached the end of their patience. Mr. Peterson. Elena called out, recognizing their neighbor from 3 houses down. Harold Peterson was 78 years old, a retired Army colonel who'd lived in the neighborhood for 30 years. He'd always been friendly but reserved, the kind of neighbor who kept his yard immaculate and his opinions to himself. Until now. You've been sitting out here for 3 days with that damn camera, disrupting this entire street, Harold barked. At Derek, his military bearing intact despite his age and bathrobe. We've had children afraid to play in their own yards, families afraid to check their mail. This ends tonight. Derek turned his camera toward Harold. Sir, I'm conducting a legitimate investigation. I have every right to. You have the right. To be a public nuisance, apparently, Harold interrupted. But the rest of us have rights too. The right to peaceful enjoyment of our homes. The right to feel safe in our own neighborhood. More figures began emerging from houses up and down the street. The Johnsons from next door. The young couple with the new baby from across the way. Even Mrs. Rodriguez, who worked night shifts, and was usually asleep by this time. What's going on out here? Called Tom Johnson, Elena's immediate neighbor on the other side from Karen. This man has been surveilling the Chen family for days, Harold explained, his voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to command. He's been using cameras, megaphones, and intimidation tactics to harass our neighbors. Derek looked suddenly less confident as he found himself surrounded by a growing crowd of angry residents. I'm conducting a legal investigation commissioned by one of your neighbors. Mrs. Whitmore has evidence of property fraud, and Karen Whitmore. Mrs. Rodriguez laughed, but there was no humor in the sound. That woman has filed complaints about every family on this street. She called code enforcement on me because my roses were allegedly growing over the property line. 2 inches over. She reported us for a noise violation because our 6-month-old was crying during her afternoon nap, added Sarah Johnson. A 6-month-old baby. She measured our mailbox post and claimed it was in violation of HOA guidelines, said another voice from the crowd. We don't even have an HOA. Derek's camera had stopped flashing. For the first time since this began. He looked uncertain. Harold stepped closer, his voice dropping to the measured tone of someone delivering an ultimatum. Son, I don't know what Karen Whitmore is paying you, but it's not enough. This neighborhood has put up with her harassment for 2 years, and we are not going to let her bring outside agitators in to continue it. Sir, you can't threaten me. I have witnesses and, who's threatening? Harold spread his arms wide, indicating the crowd of neighbors. We are just a group of concerned citizens having a conversation with a visitor to our neighborhood. A visitor who's overstayed his welcome. The crowd murmured agreement, and Derek took a step backward toward his car. This investigation isn't over, he said, but his bravado was gone. Mrs. Whitmore has rights, and she's going to exercise them. Then she can exercise them somewhere else, Harold replied. Because if you're back here tomorrow, we are going to exercise our rights too. The right to file noise complaints every time you use that megaphone. The right to report suspicious activity every time you point that camera at our homes. The right to make your life as difficult as you've been making ours. Derek packed up his equipment with hurried, jerky movements, clearly rattled by the unified opposition. As he loaded his car, Harold called out one final warning. And tell Karen Whitmore that her neighbors are done being polite about her harassment. She wants a war. She's got one. But it's not going to be the war she expected. Derek's car disappeared around the corner, its taillights fading into the darkness. The crowd began to disperse, but not before each neighbor stopped to offer support. To Marcus and Elena. If she tries anything else, you call me, Harold said, shaking Marcus's hand. I didn't serve 25 years in the army to come home and watch bullies terrorize my neighbors. As the street returned to quiet, Marcus and Elena stood on their porch, hardly daring to believe that the cons